Welcome. We are live on Facebook. I have a few of you joining me here in the Zoom room, and I did post the link there in the Facebook group as well. So if you decide you have a question, you want to ask it, then just go over to that link, hop in with the password sew, and you'll be able to get in even if I'm busy doing something, and just yell at me and say, hey, I have a question. Depending on what I'm working on, I might not be looking at the screen, so I won't notice you if you're like waving at me or trying to get my attention. But I do love questions, and that is the fun part of doing these live type trainings, is that they're interactive, so it makes it a lot more fun. So stockings, they're a quick, easy project. We all, if we sew, have a stash, and it grows with every project, it seems. And yeah, they're just a really fun, easy project. And I wanted to make stockings for my two little guys. They're 2 and 3, and I thought, oh, they would love stockings with their name this year and start a new tradition. And then my sister's actually joining us, so I spontaneously decided yesterday, why would I just sew 2 stockings if I could sew 4? Right, 2 days before Christmas. But they're pretty easy project. And this is my little stocking. Actually, I've had this one as long as I can remember. My grandma sewed me this little stocking. Yeah, and she's unfortunately no longer with us, but it reminds me of her, and it reminds me of Christmas as a child. The only problem is it's a little small. But I'm going to do the ones today a little bit bigger, but depending on what you're sewing, who you're sewing it for, if it's a decoration, if it's a tree ornament, even a stocking can be a fun little tree ornament as well. You can really do any size. I do have this other stocking we'll use as an example today. It is much larger. It's almost getting a little too large. I actually made this stocking myself when I was 18 for a friend who turned into my husband. So yeah, Bjorn is his name. I embroidered that. So I picked out this fabric because of the cars, and I knew he likes cars, right? So the one problem with this fabric, and this is a great kind of topic for our just aligning your sewing variables. The pattern on this fabric is actually quite large. So when I went to cut it out, I was like, if I don't make it on the large size, I'm going to be cutting through all of these cars, and he's not going to have any actual whole vehicles on the stocking. So thinking about, the size of your garment, whether it's a garment, the size of your project, if it's a household item, when you're picking out your fabric is really key for making a good choice, and a choice that you're really going to be happy with. So let's take a look at this page down here. And once again, welcome to everyone who's joining in last minute. Welcome to this episode of Workshop Wednesday. We're going to take a look here and do a quick little tutorial how you can easily make your own stocking pattern. So the nice thing about starting with the paper is, even if you do end up shaping it a little bit different than maybe you'd really like to have it, you can easily do adjustments as well. So as I mentioned earlier on, I'm going to do kind of a combination of these 2 sizes. I have this a large example here and this a smaller example. The main shape though that we're creating is a right corner at the top. So your top edge, you'll want to have it straight, and you'll want to have right corners as you go down. The size and shape of the foot is really totally up to you. So this is a great pattern to get started on if you haven't really done lots of kind of pattern drafting on your own yet. This is a great place to get started. As we go down into the foot, it is actually really nice to do it a little bit at an angle, pointed down. If you do it too square, then your toe is going to hang funny. And if you do it at an angle, then it will still want to kind of hang flat, even though the toe isn't attached here. Whereas if it's straight going out, it will kind of flop over funny, and you won't have that nice mantle hanging look when you hang it up, where you can see the whole foot. So let's get started with a nice right angle. Whatever tools you have, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to use my regular pattern square for garment making here. It's a little bit on the larger size. And before you get started, it's important to have an idea of what is the finished size you want to create. And when you add your seam allowance, what is the working size? So when you're pattern drafting, you can create a pattern without any seam allowance, that's the finished size, or you can already add that extra amount, whatever the seam allowance is you want to use, to the measurements that you're doing, and you don't need to think about adding the seam allowance after the fact. So today, just to be quick and easy, I'm going to use measurements including my seam allowance. I love using centimeters just because you can divide them by 10 when sewing. So I know all of you joining from the States, you're more common with inches, but I like to do just a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and it's really a good size to not have too much bulk, but to have enough that it's not going to rip out. So I'm going to get started here by just drawing in a right angle with no particular measurements. And then this is going to be the top of my stocking. So the very top, I want it finished to be 20 centimeters. So I'm going to do 22 as I come along here. So this is kind of a medium. If I lay this smaller one on here, right at the corner, I've got a good little section, probably about 1.5 inches, 5 centimeters wider. So it'll be a good little section wider. Just going to put a marking on so that I can, or I'm going to use a smaller ruler with my whole setup here. I don't have space for that big one, to really get myself set up with a nice right angle. Right angles are always easier to add other pieces to. So we'll be cutting out 2, and I'm actually going to line this stocking. I'm getting a little bit fancier than my grandma or myself actually previously. I didn't line my husband's stocking at all. And then I'm going to bring this down pretty long and curve it in. Let's just see, this is about 45 is what I've done. And this is going to be kind of the length of the main body, and I'm going to start curving. So if you have curved rulers, you can always bring out rulers. I like to, especially when I'm doing fun projects like this, I like to just kind of do some freehand, keep it really creative. This is actually a Japanese ruler for doing arm side shaping. So it's kind of fun to have different rulers. I'm going to kind of straighten out on the bottom of the foot. And I think I'm going to do about a 30 centimeter, roughly 30 centimeter. So 32 again with my extra that I'm adding for my seam allowance. So bring the toe maybe to about this kind of height. Just have kind of a rough mark as I curve it around. So if you're making your own stocking, make it larger, then people can fit more gifts in it for you, right? If you're responsible for filling the stocking, you might want to make it a little smaller. But yeah, I love stockings too, just for Christmas decor, even in the house. So I'm going to use this ruler as I curve up. It's already really starting to look like a stocking. Just want to make sure that my top edge here is going to blend in nicely with the right angle of the top. I'm going to reshape this a little bit so it doesn't dip on the top of the toe. Yeah, get this one going here. And there's so many different ways you can decorate them too. It can be really fun. I've been pulling out different pieces in my sewing room that I've squirreled away, little bits of trim, edging. As far as grain line is concerned, it is typically most common way to do a stocking would be the right direction in the grain line, depending on your print or pattern. You could also do it whatever way best suits your pattern. But since I have this straight edge here and this straight square edge at the top, The grain line that I'm going to mark on this pattern is just going to be straight in this direction. Though actually a bias cut stocking might be nice just so that you have a little bit of stretch if you have those gifts that aren't fitting in right. A little bit of stretch could be a good thing. So I'm just going to put in my little grain line arrows. Of course, we have for sure 2 layers if we want to make the stocking so that we can put stuff inside, but I'm actually going to line it. So I'm going to put a cut times 4 on this pattern. It's always great to kind of mark your patterns, especially if you do have a sewing room like mine. I always say it's creative mess. But if you ever lose a piece of a pattern, if you mark it, this is a 1-piece pattern, so I'm just going to put stocking on it so that I know what it's for. And then it's already ready to go and cut out. So I'm going to cut this out quick here. And then we're going to take a look at the different fabric options. The ones I'm working with today are basic quilting cottons. The nice thing about quilting cottons is they're pretty easy to sew with. They're usually a pretty good price, and they also feel really nice. I love cotton fabric. They have such fun colors and prints. You can pretty much use whatever fabric you want. It really doesn't matter what fiber. Of course, the heavier one is going to make a stiffer stocking. Anything stretchy or soft is going to hang and drape out. But since this isn't actually going to be worn, it doesn't need to have any kind of specific properties really for your comfort. So let's take a look at the fabrics that I have for my little guys. This is for my youngest son. He loves his animals. He just adopts every plush toy that comes into his sphere of living. And then I'm going to use this at the top. So this is the other thing about stockings is since you can decorate them any which way you want, you could simply create your pattern like this and cut it out and stitch it, have your little loop to hang it on, or you can get creative and add an extra band, which is what I'm going to do, that folds over. Doing it this way is going to be a really nice way to hide my seam allowance for my stocking and for the band itself, because I'm going to stitch it and then fold it over top, stitch it down so that it's totally encased. So it will be a quick way to disguise the seam as well. Since I'm doing a lining, I'm just going to cut it with a regular scissor and stitch it with a regular lock stitch. I noticed on this one that my grandma made me, she literally just folded it over once. I didn't even fold it over twice. I was like, really? But I mean, it survived 30 plus years. So there you go. And she just did a plain stitch in here. So you really don't have to get fancy with your choices, but it's nice to align the sewing variables, your stitching, the production plan to really get the best product. So when whatever it is that you're creating, what is the use? And for me, I like things to be clean even on the inside, just so that you don't have threads hanging around or things unraveling. So that's why I'm going to do the 2 layers. The other thing that gives me a bonus with the double layers is that it's a little bit heavier. It's still not stiff, so I'm not adding an interfacing or something like that, but it has a little bit extra weight with the double layer, and also having the 2 seams on the side from the outer layer and the inner layer also gives the edge some more structure, so it will hang better, because this stocking is really quite soft when it's hanging on the mantle without anything in it. So that's why I'm going to do the double layers for this one, and then it gives me that nice little edge. The other thing I want to do on here, because this fabric is quite busy, is I want to do a toe and a heel. I think toes and heels on socks or stockings are super cute. And once you've created your stocking pattern, it's really easy to actually create the extra heel and toe pattern. And you can really do however much or as little as you want. So I'm just gonna freehand actually draw this in. I think for the toe, I'm gonna do something somewhat of a curved line, a soft curve, and then the heel is gonna be a little bit more at an angle. So I want them to kind of be proportional to each other in that one of them isn't a lot smaller than the other one. So I'm just gonna give this a little bit of a sharper corner, as heels usually do. And then I've already created my pattern for both of these pieces. Now I could make a separate one, and that's what I'm going to do here quick with this tissue. So scrap piece of tissue I was drawing some other examples on, but I'm going to use this. Just tissues so quick and easy. Of course, you can use tracing paper. The seam allowance for these you'd want to have typically similar, especially if you have a print or design that you want to have. I'm actually not going to put the seam allowance on here just because it's not really a big deal if it is off for this project. And I want to really look at the design of this plaid when I'm cutting it out and decide how I want to do it. I might want to do it diamond, like in the bias, compared to having the top square. So we're going to take a look at that a little bit later. But this way I have my pieces. Now, the other thing about this, adding these little guys on the stocking, is I need to decide if I'm going to finish this edge or if I'm just going to cut it with a pinking shear, or if I need a seam allowance. Since I already have my seam allowance in the body, I don't need a seam allowance on this edge, body of the stocking, but this edge would need to be finished somehow. I'm actually wondering if maybe I should do even a little bit of binding on that edge. That could be cool. I've pulled this out of my stash. No, this color would be better, but I don't think I have enough. It's just a very small piece. Nope, that's not going to be enough. So I think what I'm going to actually do here is, because I can't leave a raw edge, I'm that kind of sewer, I'm going to add just a little bit of seam allowance here to tuck underneath this toe as I stitch it on so that I can have a finished edge. I'm going to do a little bit of less seam allowance on the heel because I've got this sharper corner. I really only need enough seam allowance to tuck underneath and have that smooth edge. If I have too much, it's going to be bulky and adding kind of bumps as I go over that edge. I'm going to give these ones, cut these ones out, and then I can get started. Oftentimes when stockings are decorated, they will only be decorated on one side. So if they have something like this reinforced toe, it's, of course, since it's your project, you can decide what you want on it. If you want to have both sides reinforced or just the front side. Of course, then it's important to know if you have a preferred angle for hanging it up. But it's really nice when you can just kind of copy your pattern. You can quickly and easily make the new pieces. So there we go. We have all of these pieces. These would be the stocking toe. I'm just going to label them again so that they don't get lost. And I'm just going to cut this out. I'm just going to do it on the front. So I'm going to cut it out just one time. Same with the back. Okay. So now that I have all my pieces, I can go on and cut out my fabric. How I'm going to actually do the edge. I got a little bit longer than this scrap piece. So this is the fun part about scrap projects, is you might not have the right amount of fabric. So I'm going to readjust how I'm going to add the fold over part, and then I can accommodate for the whole length of my pattern piece and just fold it over and have a little bit more of this, since I've got enough length here to do a longer fold. So that's going to work great. So do we have any questions in the group here? As far as the pattern drafting, how a pattern is formed, and what kind of just adjustments you may want to think about or make? No questions? This is a pretty straightforward project, and whether you are adding a cuff on the top or making just the plain stocking itself and jazzing it up with whatever, I've pulled out a few other fun things like these pom-poms. They may get added on somewhere. This golden band I thought looked very Christmassy, and I've been hanging on to this tassel for quite a while in my little box of things in my sewing room, and I thought this looks like it needs to be on a Christmas project as well. So it is always fun, especially if you are working at the last minute, to pull out little odds and ends and things that are just waiting to find the perfect project to adjust to. That really kind of wraps up the end of our class today. I'm going to be sewing this one and sewing the other couple of stockings I have as well. I've pulled out, and this fabric is what my older son is going to get, and he has this plaid to go with it. So they're going to be coordinating, but not the same. And we'll see how much remnants I have from those two if we're going to do the same technique. But that's really the beauty of being able to sew your own garments and projects of any type, is that you can adjust and mold the project as you move through it. And when you run into something, learning how to kind of problem solve and work through it is just super valuable to creating whatever it is that you might want to create. So I hope you enjoyed this little mini class on a stocking pattern. And of course, the sewing of it is pretty straightforward in just really closing the seam of the stocking around the outside. If you don't have anything to attach to it, or if you have things like this reinforced toe, then you would want to stitch those on prior to closing the main portion. And then whatever type of hem or finish, if you do a bias trim or folding it over, there's so many ways that you can just finish it off at the top as well. So the actual production plan can really be adjusted to whatever type of end result you're wanting to create, the finished look you want, or for whatever types of materials or remnants you're using to make the pieces and the fabric that you're using kind of stretch and work with your project. So I'm going to end the live here on Facebook. So thanks for joining us there. And I'm going to just wrap up with everyone who's joined me on Zoom. Chat soon. Take care.
Bye, Chelsea.
Bye.